Good evening, teachers. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight for the fifth webinar in our series, marking the 90th commemoration of the Holodomor in Ukraine. It is a pleasure to be with you this evening from the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit, which is home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, with whom we gratefully share this land. My name is Valentina Cureliu. I worked as a department head of history and social studies with 35 years of teaching experience at the Toronto District School Board. Presently, I serve as the Director of Education of the Holodomor Research and Education Consortium, commonly known as HREC, at the Canadian Institute of Ukrainian Studies, University of Alberta, with offices in Toronto. HREC was established in 2013 thanks to the generous support of the Temerty Foundation, for which we are very grateful. I am also the chair of the National Holodomor Education Committee of the Ukrainian Canadian Congress. Because this year is the ending of the 90th anniversary commemorating Ukraine's genocide, we created these webinars for Educator series, which focuses on recently published historical fiction centering on the Holodomor, which can be used in various ways in classrooms. I am proud to introduce our host for this evening. Mateusz Swidlicki is an assistant professor at the University of Wrocław Institute of English Studies in Poland. He is the director of the Center for Young People's Literature and Culture and a co-founder of the Center for Research on Children's and Young Adult Literature. Mateusz has been a research scholar at the University of Florida's Department of English, Kosciuszko Foundation Fellowship, a Fulbright scholar at the University of Illinois at Chicago, a visiting scholar at the University of Toronto, and has held multiple other fellowships in Munich, Kiev, and Harvard. Dr. Swidlicki is the author of more than 60 scholarly publications in English, Polish, Ukrainian, and Croatian. His work appears in many journals, including Children's Literature and Education and Bookbird. He is the deputy editor-in-chief of Philotechnos, a member of the editorial team of John Benjamin Publishing's Children's Literature, Culture, and Cognition series, and a representative of the Childhood and Youth Network of the Social Studies History Association. His book, Next Generation Memory and Ukrainian Canadian Children's Historical Fiction, The Seeds of Memory, examines the transnational entanglements of Canada and Ukraine. Thank you for being here tonight to be our host. We look forward to your insights. Now over to you, Mateusz.
Thank you, Valentina. It's my pleasure to introduce our today's guest, Kat Karpenko. Kat was born to Ukrainian parents in Windsor, Ontario, Canada, but she spent most of her life in Nova Scotia working at Dalhousie University's Office of External Affairs. Kat also taught the art of writing pisanki, traditional Ukrainian Easter eggs. Since retiring, she spends winters in Mazatlan, Mexico, pursuing her writing career. Having previously worked in technical writing, journalism, and short stories, she has resumed creative writing and has published 2 novels of historical fiction. Emma's Ghost, inspired by her love of Nova Scotia and its history, and Photograph, a tribute to her paternal grandparents who left Ukraine in 1928. Kat, the floor is now yours for a reading from your historical fiction novel, The Photograph.
I'd like to read from chapter 2, which features a 9-year-old boy, Arkady. And the character Arkady is based on my father, who is in the center of this photograph. This chapter was first written as a short story, but I was encouraged to carry on and make this book called The Photograph. Arkady tried to find a quiet spot away from the hustle and bustle. He decided on the hayloft overlooking the courtyard. This was a place where he often had hid from his tutor when she insisted that he must study his Ukrainian and his English. Sasha, the border collie, his faithful companion since birth, lay next to him, nuzzling his pocket in search of treats. Arkady stroked his head tenderly and shared the bun that Nadia had given him, all the while taking care not to get his white shirt dirty. Locking eyes with the dog, he solemnly promised, "You'll eat well today, too. I will make sure of it." From this height, he had a clear view of the winding entrance to the large farming complex, which Mama liked to call the Karpenko estate. Everyone would soon arrive for the farewell feast. In the distance, situated next to the tributary stream of the deeper river, he could hear the mill's massive wheel churning the frothy waters. In the back gardens, the housemaids, also in constant motion, scurried around setting tables. The heavenly scent of baking bread rose from the clay oven. His stomach growled in anticipation. Nadia and the other servants had been preparing for days. He had known Nadia all his life. She had worked for his grandparents for many years. After their deaths, she came to their home to help Mama cook and take care of him and as a newly born infant, as well as his two older sisters. He watched as she wiped the perspiration from the broad face with her apron. Blinking rapidly as a tear trickled down her cheek, she stopped to blow her nose. He would miss her cooking, and yes, even her crushing hugs. But boys must not show their tears as their sisters do. It wasn't manly. Mama could not take time for tears today. She was too busy making sure everything was in readiness. He could hear her voice shouting from the house, "Tamarichka, Verushka, why are you not dressed? Go, hurry, and make sure Arkady is ready and his face is washed." She hardly paused to take a breath. It was good to be out of Mama's way this day. He had been busy this past week sorting through his belongings, trying to decide what he could not possibly leave behind. Mama and Tato insisted that only those things that would fit into his valise could be brought, and only if he could carry the weight. It had been very difficult to decide. He chose the hand-carved horse his grandfather had made, the military badges from Jadko Pavlo, the finely embroidered shirt from Tiotia Maria that he wore to church, and some of his warmest clothes. He knew his toy soldiers would be too heavy, but decided to check daily to see whether any of other toys might fit into the small bag. Two carriages stirred the dust of the road in the distance. They were filled with more uncles, aunts, and cousins from town, laden with baskets of food to add to the feast. Arkady peered across the new mown field into the shimmering autumn sun to search out Miko, his favorite cousin. Tato's sister, Aunt Anna, her husband Stefan, and their family would not be leaving with them. He was glad he would be able to play with Miko one last time. It was very tiresome to have only two older sisters to play with. Their games are so boring, and they never wanted to get their clothes dirty or climb trees. Vera was becoming much too prim and proper, spending all her time in front of the mirror and fluttering her eyes at the boys, especially at Nadia's son, Alexei. Mama would not like this. It was fun teasing her about how her cheeks turned red when Alexei looked her way. But now she was too sad. There was no fun in this game anymore. Tamara was his favorite. She told him stories about princes and dragons, but not today. Her large brown eyes seemed darker than normal, and she was unusually quiet. The girls had put on their best dresses for the occasion, but that did not put smiles on their faces, as it usually did. He could see Vera sitting in the garden under the willow tree, talking with Alexei. They looked very serious. He was holding her hand, looking into her face with sad eyes. Arkady wondered what they were saying. Perhaps he should go down and hide behind them to hear their conversation. The view was suddenly blocked as Miko's family carriage pulled into the yard. Arkady ran quickly down the ramp from the hayloft with Sasha barking at his heels. He waved and called, Miko, you're here. Miko waved back, flashing his broad smile. The two boys ran to greet each other. Miko threw his arm around Arkady's shoulder. Both 9-year-old boys were tall for their age, but Miko was as fair as Arkady was dark, and both broader and taller in build. His eyes, blue as the summer sky, twinkled now as he whispered, "I have a present for you." He took something that was tucked into his trousers and put it behind his back. "But first you must make me a promise." "Yes, of course. What is it?" Miko stared into his face. "Promise me you will always carry it with you to protect yourself from wolves and bears. I'm told they are everywhere in Canada." Arkady nodded his head and put his hand up as if taking an oath. "You have my word." Miko handed him a steel hunting knife in a deerskin sheath embroidered in gold with the Trezub emblem of Ukraine. Arkady's eyes glowed as he stroked the soft leather and admired the detailed engravings on the knife's handle. "Oh, Miko, it's wonderful. Thank you." He put it carefully into his belt. "I have something for you, too, but it must wait until you leave today." The boys made their way to the gardens, where all the relatives now mingled in animated conversations, cousins, aunts, uncles, in-laws. As they all gathered around the two long tables set up in the shade of the back garden, Tato brought out the treasured supply of homebrew and passed it out to the adults. Between games, played among the low-hanging willow trees bordering the nearby brook, the children returned often for sweet apple cider that had been cooled in the well. A strident whistle pierced the air. Nikolai held up his hands for everyone's attention. "Please, everyone, Nadia and all the help, come to the back of the garden for a photograph. Our families must preserve this last time together." Arkady watched closely as the photographer set up the camera, then arranged everyone for the group picture. The process seemed endless while his nostrils filled with wonderful food smells and his stomach growled. The men stood straight and proud in the back row, as was the custom. Luca and Maria, Nikolai and Juliana, the two departing couples, sat in the center. Arkady, Tamara, and Vera sat at their parents' feet. Georgi sat on his babka's lap, now happy. The infants were unaware that one should look serious in a photograph. The children tried to keep still as their parents had directed, but were not always successful. Arkady held his breath and stared at the camera as it flashed. Finally, after several photos, his father called the guests for dinner. After appetites had been sated, he watched Yatko Pavlo heave his broad frame onto one of the garden benches. He whistled loudly through his white mustache to get everyone's attention. "Friends and family, we are gathered here today with our hearts as heavy as our stomachs. Today we bid farewell to the families of Nikolai and Luka. They will be sorely missed by all. Let us drink a toast to their safe journey and to their future happiness in Canada." Adults raised glasses, and the traditional song of praise, Myohailita, sprang from the lips of all. Rich harmonies of bass and baritone from the men, soprano and alto from the women, blended and rose to a powerful finale. Emotion surged as the song ended, releasing the sadness that flooded their hearts. Women dabbed their eyes with embroidered handkerchiefs, and men let tears flow without embarrassment. Arkady swallowed hard and quickly wiped his nose on his sleeve. He watched intently as his father cleared his throat and rose to speak, his voice loud and commanding. "Dear friends, I thank you for coming to share this Last Supper with us. We're touched and grieved by the parting, but feel it's imperative that we leave here while we're still able." He paused as he sought the eyes of all around him. His brow furrowed and his voice deepened. "Luka and I have been talking with knowledgeable people in Kiev. Things are changing now that Stalin is in command. The Ukrainization program started by Lenin has brought us a long way since the wars and famines that recently plagued our country. But these freedoms are going to end soon. Stalin fears the national patriotism of Ukrainian farmers and has no love for them. Russian Bolsheviks are calling us kulaks, enemies of the state, because we own land. But it is our land they want. An angry murmur erupted from the lips of many. Nikolai held up his hand for silence to continue. The collectivization program for farms that has been tried in the past has been started again. They will come to this farm to take all that we have worked for, including our food, our land, and our livestock. They have already started with others in nearby areas. Religious and national leaders are being persecuted throughout our homeland. I fear for all of you and beg you to prepare to leave also. There's little time left. He paused to look directly at his workers. For those of you who must stay, be aware that food will again be confiscated as it was during the wars. Our grain production this summer has declined, yet the grain quotas demanded for the state are still high. There will be food shortages. We can expect little better in the future as the Bolsheviks increase their grain quotas to sell abroad. In preparation, Pablo has been busy at the mill processing our recent harvest. We have hidden sacks of flour in the pond near the north pasture, as we did previously to survive. Water will only penetrate a small amount of the flour, so the sacks can be pulled out and used when needed. We leave these for you, our friends and faithful workers. Hide well whatever food you can. Please use the possessions we cannot take with us. God bless you all and keep you safe. And you also, Nikolai, God bless, came from the mouths of many as they gathered to embrace family members. Arkady heard the worried conversations that followed. Tato and Mama spoke very seriously with their brothers and sisters. Arkady listened to the adults, but did not fully understand why this was happening. Strangers recently came to the house looking for Tato. Was it about them? They offered him candy to tell them where his father was, but he knew better. Besides, Tato gave him candy all the time. When the party that erupted later in the day was over and the final farewells had to be made, he watched his mother cling to her only sister in a tearful embrace. Even though his sisters were sometimes annoying, he was glad Vera and Tamara would be with him. He quietly contemplated never seeing Miko or any of these people again. There was one more thing he must do before Miko left. He ran to the barn, then found his cousin near the departing wagons. With mournful looks, the two boys clasped each other around the shoulders. Grasping Miko's hand, Arkady gave him Sasha's leash and whispered, "Now my two best friends will have each other." Tamara and Vera joined in giving Sasha one last hug and stepped away. Arkady bent down to bury his face in the dog's long fur. Sasha turned to lick the salty tears from his face. Then, looking back, whimpered in confusion as Miko pulled him to the waiting wagon. Waving goodbye to the departing guests, the girls clung to each side of their mother for support. As he tried to hold back the sobs, not wanting to cry openly like his sisters, Arkady felt his father's strong arm encircle his shaking torso. Nikolai bent over, kissed his son's head, and spoke in a soft voice. "Although our hearts ache, we must now be brave. The journey will be long and dangerous."
Thank you. The Photograph is your second novel, and the first one devoted to both Ukrainian history and the experience of Ukrainian Canadians. Have you always wanted to write about your heritage?
Well, I think it was sparked by this photograph that I discovered amongst my mother's things. And when she said, this was the picture of the last farewell, the last parting of the family, and we really don't know what happened to all these people. I was just immersed in their faces and their sad eyes, and I wanted to know, well, what happened after they left and what were their chances of survival? So at that point, I started doing some research. And as I said, I started with my short story, and then my writer friends encouraged me to continue on and make it a novel.
Thank you. The photograph was published in 2020. Although it was only 3 years ago, since then, the global awareness of the Holodomor has increased, especially after Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Why did you decide to write about the Holodomor? Did you grow up knowing about the Holodomor? Is it something that you discovered while working on the book?
I had heard about the famine, and I always wondered, well, why did millions of people die when this is a rich country and has the most fertile land in Europe? How could the rest of the world let this happen? And then I always didn't understand why people didn't know about it either, because I mean, everybody knows about the genocide with the Jews, the Holocaust, but nobody seems to know about Holodomor. And I thought it was important that story should be told, and in a way that people could understand how it affected Ukraine.
Ukraine and also, other countries. Here your characters are Ukrainian Canadians, so I think that by highlighting the links between Ukraine and Canada, you managed to showcase the transcontinental, transcultural importance and relevance of the Holodomor and the intergenerational trauma connected to it. In the author's notes, which I really loved reading, you encourage your readers to ask you questions about the eponymous photograph. Using photos can be particularly useful while discussing your novel in the classroom. Have any of the responses of the readers of your novel surprised you?
Well, I guess most of the responses I get are when I do book signings and people come up to me and say, I've read your novel. I was shocked and did not know this story. And it seemed like that happened over and over again. And then every once in a while, there would be a young person in the background who said, we're taking that in school. And I thought, oh, that's great. I thought, there is something being done in that respect. And I think HREC has a lot to do with that.
And also you know, because of the book and because of the fact that it is being read, that it's a book which may appeal to older readers, younger readers. So you're also there. You're contributing to the spread of this awareness. The photograph consists of 3 parts, which showcase various experiences of Ukrainians who left Ukraine for Canada before the war and those who did not. Which part was the most difficult to write and why? Because they're very different, different experiences.
They are. Of course, the third part, where I was actually discussing the details of the famine and how people suffered, how Stalin's decrees affected everyday life and destroyed the villages in Ukraine. I immersed myself in stories from survivors, and that was extremely hard, very emotional. And I knew I had to put in some of those details to make it real for people. So that was, I think, very difficult to do. And then I had to somehow create an ending that was hopeful after this terrible tale of famine and death, and somehow create some hope, because I realized, well, 1991, Ukraine became a nation, and they didn't die. They didn't. Their national spirit did not die.
Thank you. When it comes to the details you've mentioned, I think that it's worth highlighting that your novel is a meticulously researched one. So your attention to detail is just something that the readers, those who have not read the book yet, should know, should be aware of. You definitely succeeded in showcasing all of these nuances of the experiences of these people. Talking about the ending of the novel, it is definitely hopeful, but it's also believable, which I think is powerful. So it's hopeful, but also believable. And in the novel's final chapter, you write, Ukrainians in their new lands must show the world that we are not defeated. This is a quote from page 189. Would you say that writing about the Holodomor is your way of showing the world the perseverance of the Ukrainians?
I think the story showed the perseverance of the people who stayed, suffered greatly, but many survived. And the survivors were strong, like they were the strongest of the people. It wasn't easy. Bad, horrible decisions had to be made in order to survive. I've seen this perseverance and strength in Ukrainian people. We sometimes joked and said that the characteristics are like two sides of a coin. One is stubbornness and the other is determination. And I've seen those characteristics in the Ukrainian people. They are surviving now. They are fighting a battle to the death. I wrote this book before this war, and yet I can understand now, having done the research, the story, that they're not going to let themselves be subdued by another tyrant like they did under Stalin. I see that strength.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that your book is even more relevant now because of the situation, the ongoing situation in Ukraine, and it further highlights the strength of the people. Although the photograph was not issued as a young adult novel, it has crossover potential and can be used in education. It can be used in the classroom. What is the most important thing you want your readers, especially young people, to remember or learn from your novel?
Well, I'm a big fan of historical novels because I think you learn from history. By learning the story of Holodomor, you understand what is happening today in Ukraine in a better light. You understand why the people are fighting so fiercely to maintain their land. You understand when Putin says that Stalin was a big hero of his, where he's coming from. Knowing that history puts things in perspective today. But I also think that I would like readers to honor their ancestors. Most of us, well, mostly all of us in North America are immigrant backgrounds, various degrees. And we have to thank those people who brought us to this country so that we can appreciate the freedoms that we have. So, I dedicated my book to my grandparents because I felt that their strength and their courage is the reason I'm here today, and so many other wonderful people that are in my family are here today. So we must look on immigrants and see that they often come from terrible places, with terrible stories of living under tyranny, under poverty. When they come here, we must understand that this is a hard time that they've been through and have some compassion. So I guess that this is an immigrant story in my mind in many ways.
Thank you for these powerful words, and thank you for further highlighting the links between the past and the present and also the future. Tremendous potential historical fiction has, in showcasing these links. And thank you for mentioning the experiences of immigrants. Are you planning to write another Ukrainian-themed novel or maybe a collection of short stories? Is it something you have thought about?
I would lean towards short stories. Novel is a huge commitment. It does take time and effort, and as I get on in years, that becomes less available. Yes, I really enjoyed writing this book and my first book as well. And it's gratifying to know that people are reading it, enjoying it, and learning from it.
I'm sure that they are. I know that many people love your book, and I know that many people are waiting for more. So I truly hope, and I'm sure that I'm not the only one, that you will continue writing about Ukrainian history, Ukrainian culture. And I personally love short stories. So we hope that your next book will be a collection of wonderful short stories devoted to Ukrainian culture and history. So thank you, Kat, of course. Thank you so much for your wonderful answers. Valentina, do you have any comments you want to make at this point?
Yes, thank you. And thank you for your comments too about the book. I think they were very good as well. First of all, I want to thank you, Kat, for this wonderful book. I really enjoyed it. And I think it fits for any student that is in high school from grade 9 right through to grade 12. But I also think that it is a novel that is good for adults as well. I enjoyed it as an adult and as a teacher. So thank you once more. The book, as it was mentioned, was organized into 3 parts. The first part being the year 1928, before the Holodomor, and the departure of the head of the family, moving out with his brother and his family as well. And they were aware of what was going to happen because that was the year that Stalin came to power in the Soviet Union, and they knew what was going to come. The second part deals with the extended family and what happened to them when they were left behind in Ukraine. And that was right up to 1932. And the third part, as you yourself said, was the actual experience of what happened to the people left behind during the Holodomor itself, so that the policies and the actions of the Soviet government in the Ukrainian countryside, and you did a brilliant job, as it was mentioned already, with your historical research, and I thought that was great. And of course, you described collectivization so that everybody could understand it, and I think that was very clear. Its consequences and the effect it had on individual people in the Ukrainian society, and also the destruction of their way of life in the Ukrainian village. I think that was very important too. These survivor accounts that the information that you got for all these family members were from the survivor accounts are extremely an important source of information for learning about the Holodomor. And so I think that they are very interesting for students. At least that's been my experience, not only from a historical point of view, in a historical fiction, but also in the classroom on their own as well. The story also includes a story of a deep love between a young man, Alexei, that you mentioned, who stayed behind, and his sweetheart, Vera, who left to go to Canada. And throughout the book, he continues to have adventures and tries to find a way of getting out of Ukraine and to Canada. And so it becomes an interesting love story as well. And who doesn't like to read about a love story that hopefully ends up with a good outcome? It is easy for students also to find evidence of human rights atrocities and abuses from what you wrote about the Holodomor. I think that was very important. Ukrainians also, you mentioned how the Ukrainians were able to look for ways of trying to survive, their resolve to survive, their persistence, I think was very important, as well as the family members went through tragedies, but some of them also survived. And that was the resilience of the Ukrainians themselves. And I think you gave the reader a feeling of hope that regardless of the horrific catastrophe that was happening around them, we still are going to persevere. And of course, the Ukrainian population, 85% of them at that time lived in villages and on the farms. So that was very important. The collectivization process was definitely very well described. And also it was clear who were the victims in this story and who were the perpetrators. And I thank you for that, because that was very important too. You also described some of the things that were the policies that were brought in. You talked about the toxins and their purpose in this society, and also the blacklisting of the villages. In 1/3 of all villages, no supplies, nothing in or out, left to starve. So I think that was very important that was done. So there's so much in this book that any student can learn a lot about the Holodomor, of the various aspects of life. And I thank you for it. And for me, it resonates, as I am also the daughter of 2 survivors. Anyway, I'll finish on that note, and I'll turn things back to Mateusz, who's going to facilitate the question and answer session.
Thank you, Valentina, for your powerful comments. So the first question, where did your family originate from in Ukraine? What in your book's content is derived from your own family-specific lived experiences, specifically with regard to the Holodomor?
My grandfather came from a village outside of Kiev. I don't know names, even of the family people in the picture. I don't know all of their names, and I don't know the names of the villages they're from. So I couldn't actually do specific research. That's why I had to create characters and put them in a situation that my family might have been. There were a couple of things in that chapter that I read that I did know. When Nikolai talks about throwing the sacks of flour in the pond and keeping them for the people, I heard that story as I was growing up. This is what they did in order to protect their flour from the Bolsheviks who were coming in and taking all the food. And then the other story about, or the other part about Arkady not telling the Bolsheviks where his father was when they were trying to find him. Those are actually parts of family history.
We have a few questions. I will read the one which is also connected to your family. As a grandchild of immigrants who left during this period, what in particular did you want to honor them with by writing the book? Did you feel an obligation to do so, or was it curiosity mostly, wanting to put the puzzle pieces together? Did your family talk much about their experiences in Ukraine while you were growing up?
Actually, nobody wanted to talk about those days. I was a young child, so nobody was going to talk to me about the famine or what they left behind. I, again, relied on my research to get the details together about that.
But I'm sure that you did want to honor your family in a way, yeah?
Yes, I did. There was two parts of my reasons was to honor my grandparents for the courage and sacrifice they made to come to Canada and start all over again. And as I pointed out in my book, it was during the Dust Bowl and the terrible times of the 1930s that they came to Canada. Mm-hmm. So there was a whole story there that can be told of them surviving those hardships. Then the other part was, no, I was curious about Holodomor. I wanted these questions answered that I had, why it happened and how it happened and who was responsible. Why did people not come and help them? That was because Stalin didn't tell anybody. People weren't allowed to talk about the famine, and the journalists were given misinformation, so nobody knew.
The power of propaganda also worked when it comes to journalism. So you managed to put these pieces together. History, your family's history, the need to honor your family. You definitely succeeded. Let us move to this, I think, two-part question. Thank you so much for your presentation. I just read your book before the webinar, and I spent a lot of time looking at the family photograph on the back cover and trying to match the people in it with the characters in your book. Could you speak more about how you use the photograph to craft your story? Also, one of the figures that most interested me was a man standing in the back and making a hand signal. Do you know who this is and what his hand signal means?
No, I don't really know what that meant. I looked at those faces, and the only ones that I really knew were my grandparents and father and his two sisters and Uncle Luca and his family and his wife. I had to kind of picture, okay, who's related here and who could they be? I knew there was four brothers and four sisters. Two of the brothers left for Canada, so that meant there were two left. And so I had to look at that and figure, well, which two would they be? And I knew that perhaps my grandfather wasn't the oldest. He was probably in the middle somewhere. So, and then I looked at some of the expressions. The characters just jumped out at me. And then as I started writing them, they were telling a story. It's amazing what happens when you start writing characters. They start talking to you.
It's interesting in the context of photographs, what photographs represent. When there's no story, they're just people. We know nothing about them. But when there's a story, these people become real characters. Yeah. Also, when it comes to family stories, the stories that we heard from our family members, we only recognize the people we were told about. And there are many other people among these photographs which our parents, grandparents have, but we don't know them and they do not matter. And I think that by writing this book, you made these people become alive again, at least symbolically. We have two more questions. Your novel is very teachable because your research is so careful and meticulously accurate in it. And yet, it is also very moving and insightful into the characters' feelings and experiences. Can you share what some of your research sources were when you were doing the research for the book?
Of course, HREC was one of the first places I went, and there is a whole wealth of research material there. I also had some books that were about the stories from Holodomor survivors, in details, stories that they told. Also some videos that showed actual scenes from that time. So that made it very real for me. I really appreciated Anne Applebaum's book, Red Famine, which laid out the way Stalin orchestrated this whole thing. And I could finally see the steps, as I tried to show throughout my book, how each decree that he made things worse for the people, and they became more and more trapped in where they were without the help of anyone, really.
Do have more questions, and the questions are so different. What advice do you have for aspiring writers, especially those who are interested in writing historical fiction?
Well, I think you have to find a topic you're interested in and then read about it. Read about all different versions of what happened to get the details, to get the history correct. And then you have to develop characters that are sympathetic, that the reader will be able to relate to. That's really important, because if you don't have that human contact in your story, without that, it's just very flat. The details are important, but also the emotions that can be generated by the historical facts.
I agree. These are the markers of a good historical novel. The very last question. Your novel has a very cinematic sweep and feel to it, following the applied movements and decimation of a family. Can you see it as a film in the future? Can you imagine your book becoming a movie, like from a photograph and a book and then to a movie?
A friend of mine who was this a script writer who said, this could really be a good movie. I said, well, yeah, well, you go talk to people, will you? Yeah, I think it would be visually very effective.
So we're keeping our fingers crossed that there are some producers interested, in making visually beautiful movies about important topics, and that one day your book will end up becoming a highly successful feature film. Thank you for all of the thought-provoking questions. Thank you to Kat Karpenko, most especially for joining us and sharing her creative process with us. Kat, thank you for your wonderful answers. Thank you to our webinar techs for the amazing job you do. Thank you to Sophia Isayu, who is fantastic. Thank you, Sophia, for organizing and coordinating these webinars. And thank you, of course, to Valentina Corelli for introducing the webinars and for her important summary remarks. Valentina, could you have your closing remarks, please?
Certainly. I would like to extend our thanks to Kat Karpenko, first of all, for her novel, The Photograph, and for talking with us about her masterpiece. Thank you also to Mateusz Sidlicki for gracing us with his knowledge and expertise in hosting this webinar. Congratulations to you both for doing such a fabulous job. It has been a real pleasure. For everyone who came to participate tonight, in the chat, you will find a list you can download before you leave of resources about the Holodomor that are suitable for different grade levels that you may be interested in using in your classrooms. Our top picks, as we call them. Our next and final webinar is going to be held on a Thursday evening again, on November the 16th this year, at the same time. We will be looking at the and discussing American author Aaron Litikin's novel, The Memory Keeper of Kiev, with her. And it's to commemorate this year's Holodomor Memorial Day in schools, in which will be coming up on November the 24th. It's a Friday, the fourth Friday of the month. For additional information about the Holodomor and our webinar series, please visit our website, the HREC website, the HREC education website. It's called education.holodomor.ca. It also has plenty of teacher resources and teaching materials for your use. If you don't have it already, please download our annual Holodomor Memorial Day pamphlet, which highlights an announcement and other resources to use in the classroom for Holodomor Memorial Day in schools on November 24th of this year. And if you need a text for teaching the Holodomor, there is information about my 308-page book entitled Holodomor in Ukraine for teachers and students on our website as well. Also, please consider applying for our annual HREC Educator Award for Holodomor Lesson Plan Development, which is on our website, and the deadline to apply is May the 1st, 2024. With this, we shall be ending our webinar today. So thank you all for participating, for your interest in the Holodomor. Today, Russia's war on Ukraine continues. And we see that in it that some of the things happening in today's war are very similar to what happened in Ukraine to Ukrainian people during the Holodomor in the 1930s, especially what is happening to the children of Ukraine today. According to the UN and Ukrainian government, at least 20,000 children have been recorded to have been deported from orphanages or taken from their parents and placed in youth camps in Russia, adopted, or are being re-educated to become Russians. But this number is just the recorded and verified number. Many specialists believe that the actual numbers are much higher, as high as 700,000. We see that in this and in other ways, the Kremlin's genocidal intentions for Ukraine and its people to wipe out Ukrainian identity and to wipe out any ideas about Ukraine existing as a sovereign nation continue today as they did in the 1930s. Today's Russia's war on Ukraine demonstrates the relevance of studying the Holodomor to current events, and we are grateful to all the authors who have written the novels about the Holodomor to bring it to the awareness of today's youth and the audience in general. We hope to see you again on the 16th of November for our final webinar. And Slava Ukraini. Дякую.